So as you can see in this picture, it's only a bird's eye view that will take you over the previous projects before ChiLLS, namely Co-Minor Inquest 1. Is a very, let's say, a complex acronym, but it stands for Cooperation in Interpreter Mediated Questioning of Minors, and we worked on this project with the consortium from 2012 until 2014. And let's say, keep this in mind, the only child participation at that time was the logo that was designed by a child of 10 years old, the daughter of one of the coordinators. So, but what were the goals for this project? The research, as was already outlined by others, is about questioning children in the pre-trial phase of criminal cases. And of course, what interests us is this focus on interviews that are interpreter mediated. Of course, EU directives have helped us with this, and other people will explain them further, so I don't go into detail for that, but still the definition of a minor is very important, namely a child is vulnerable by definition, so that's clear, full stop, because of their age, because in this particular case they have no knowledge of the language of the proceedings, and because of their procedural status as a victim, as a witness, or as a suspect, because we started out working with children as victims, but then again with the lawyers and the stakeholders that are in our consortium, we decided that it's sometimes very hard to draw the line between a victim, a witness, and a suspect. So how did we do that? How did we try to do our research? First of all, at that time in 2012, we had to map the situation because near to nothing was known about interpreter-mediated questioning of minors. So we did an international survey and asked people how they deal with child-centered approach and how they deal with it in a multidisciplinary team. Of course, for us, what is known to us is the interpreter, but of course there are a lot of people in this team can be present. A police officer can be present, psychologist, a child support worker, legal actors, youth lawyers, youth judges, and others. So we sent this survey out, and we received about 1,000 answers. So this was indicating for us. This was indicating and important for us to show that it was an important topic, that people were struggling with it. What were the results? In a nutshell, the lack of the knowledge and an understanding about the own role as a professional and the requirements to behave as a professional. For example, how do you cope with minors as an interpreter if you don't have the experience? How do you cope with minors? Just one of the possible questions and doubts. There was a lack also of knowledge and understanding about the roles and the requirements of the other professionals in the room. For example, for the interpreter, it's very important to know the exact questioning technique of the police officer. What do we know about youth law? What do we know about child development? I mean, as interpreters, but also the other professionals. It's, I guess, for a police officer, no, we guess for a police officer, not a daily practice to see if a child has some disabilities or learning difficulties, or how to define exactly vulnerability. So this is something we found out after Co-Minor 1. And of course, as you can see, people don't know very much about interpreting and how to work. So other professionals often don't know how to work with an interpreter. What is his or her role, and what are the boundaries of this role? What was also came out as a result of the Co-Minor 1 was the lack of time and trust. So you need time when you speak with a minor. And of course, this concept came, or we heard already talking about this concept during the previous speeches. Trust is very important. Trust is important for the child, but trust is also important for the professionals who are present. They often don't trust the professionality of the interpreter, and the other way around. The interpreter um, sometimes feels frustrated because the other professionals, let's say police officers, judges, etc., don't know how to work with an interpreter. So these results showed us, I mean, this was not what we were saying, that was what stakeholders were saying. This showed us that there was a need for teamwork and for interprofessional training. The interpreter is part of the team, and so there is this awareness raising that started with the co-minor one. Okay, very quickly, the deliverables of this conference were of this project were a book and a conference at that time, a live conference. But just to show you that you will find it later on the website, that it was really a book written with a lot of professionals, different professionals. I don't read them out for you, but you can see academics, interpreters, youth lawyers, etc., etc. So it was a very, the book itself was written by a multidisciplinary team. And this leaflet that is translated in 5 or 6 languages was also a very important deliverable, a first start to tell other professionals, meaning always the other professionals next to the interpreter and the interpreters themselves, how to behave before, during, and after the interview. Just the gist of important rules that one should respect. Okay, and then we decided to move on, as I said before, with a little break between 14 and 16, but then we received fundings for the Co-Minor 2 project. Again, it's the same acronym. And the goals there were to design actually this interprofessional training. How did we start doing that? Not just designing a training in a few days, but first of all, we had focus group discussions with the stakeholders in Italy, France, and Belgium. So all these professionals, the youth judge, the youth lawyer, the interpreters, the police officer, etc., to discuss the results of the first project. And very novel in this was that we involved stakeholders we didn't involve yet, namely the minors themselves, that who challenged the results. So the first project was completely about children. In the second project, we involved the minors and we gave them a voice. However, it was the research methodology was a semi-experiment, and children found very important the trust with the people in the room, the seating arrangement to see and hear everybody very well. The interpreting mode, they weren't very sure about the simultaneous mode. For them, the interpreter is very present as a trust person. So the other professionals in the room need to be aware of that. Of course, it's logical because the interpreter is the only one in the room that understands the child and speaks his language, and a child-friendly behavior for them was also crucial. The deliverables were several products, let's say a manual, a concrete manual for interprofessional training, so everybody can start actually tomorrow to do this training with this manual. Animation movies for the stakeholders and the professionals that work with minors, and the animation and 2 animation movies for minors from 3 to 6 years and from 6 to 7 years old, on the figure of the interpreter, as you can see, to explain them who is this person. And then I conclude by saying where we have arrived now. These were the narratives that came from Co-Minor 1 and 2. And you heard, as I said, these concepts were pinpointed already before. Trust, teamwork, interprofessional training, children's rights, child-friendly justice, and vulnerability. So the goals of this project, I don't repeat it because Ms. Bright already told you in her opening speech what are the goals. So to inform highly vulnerable minors and to inform stakeholders when working with minors that don't speak the language of the proceedings. And all this information will be brought together on a website. We take everything a step further. Child participation was now part of the project and not in an experimental way anymore. So we really involved minors, for example, during our workshop, but we also interviewed minors. Focus on vulnerability was important in this project in criminal proceeding and asylum proceedings. And of course, this is a little bit, let's say, DNA of our research group. The stakeholders' involvement is very important to us. Okay, the workshop, I don't want to go in on it, took place in May 2019, was quick enough to read all the stakeholders that were present will see that they were very diverse. And I repeat, there was a participation of our child ambassadors from Hungary in this workshop in Belgium. And then the real participation of minors took place thanks to interviews with vulnerable minors. Of course, we will explain later on that this wasn't an easy job to do, but we come back to that later on. So the deliverables of this project are an online conference, toolkits for professionals, compass for children, everything will be explained, and all other materials and links on our final ChiLLS website. So I hope you understand better now where we are coming from, where this ChiLLS project is coming from Co-Minor 1 and 2. And I would like to give the floor now to Stefan Albrecht, our research assistant at KU Leuven, who studied law himself and is expert in child rights or has worked a lot with children's rights. And I would like to give him the floor to present the perspective of the law in interpreter-mediated hearing.